Chapter 5. In January there came bitterly hard weather. The earth was like iron, and nothing could be done in the fields. Many meetings were held in the big barn. The pigs occupied themselves with planning out the work of the coming season. It had come to be accepted that the pigs should decide all questions of farm policy. This would have worked well enough if it had not been for the disputes between Snowball and Napoleon. These two disagreed at every point. Each had his own following, and there were some violent debates. But none was so bitter as the one that took place over the windmill. In the long pasture not far from the farm buildings, there was a small knoll, which was the highest point on the farm. After surveying the ground, Snowball declared that it was just a place for a windmill, which could be made to operate a dynamo and supply the farm with electrical power. This would light the stalls and warm us in winter, and would also run a circular saw and electric milking machine. The animals listened in astonishment, while Snowball conjured up pictures of their fantastic machines which would do the work for them. Snowball used as his study a shed, which had once been used for incubators and had a smooth wooden floor suitable for drawing on. He was closeted there for hours at a time. Gradually, the plans grew into a complicated mass covering more than half of the floor, which the other animals found completely unintelligible but very impressive. All of them came to look at Snowball's drawings at least once a day. Only Napoleon held aloof. He had declared himself against the windmill from the start. The great need now was to increase food production and procure firearms and train ourselves in the use of them. Firearms? If we can't defend ourselves, we are bound to be conquered. If rebellions happened everywhere, we would have no need to defend ourselves. The whole farm was deeply divided. At last the day came when Snowball's plans were completed. At the meeting on the following Sunday, the question of whether or not to begin work on the windmill was put to a vote. Snowball stood up, and, though occasionally interrupted by bleating from sheep, set forth his reasons for advocating the building of the windmill. Then Napoleon stood up to reply. The windmill is nonsense, and nobody should vote for it. He had spoken for barely 30 seconds, and seemed almost indifferent as to the effect he produced. Snowball broke into a passionate appeal in favor of the windmill, and painted a picture of Animal Farm as it might be when sordid labor was lifted from the animals' backs. By the time he had finished speaking, there was no doubt as to which way the vote would go. But just at this moment, Napoleon uttered a whimper no one had ever heard him utter before. Grrr. At this, there was a terrible baying sound outside, and 9 enormous dogs came bounding into the barn. They dashed straight for Snowball. He sprang from his place just in time to escape their snapping jaws. In a moment, he was out the door, and they were after him. Too amazed and frightened to speak, all animals crowded through the door to watch the chase. Snowball was racing across the long pasture, slipped through a hole in the hedge, and was seen no more. Where did these creatures come from? The problem was soon solved. They were the puppies whom Napoleon had taken away from their mothers and reared privately. From now on, the Sunday meetings will come to an end. All questions relating to the working of the farm will be settled by a special committee of pigs, presided over by myself. Afterwards, Squealer was sent round the farm to explain the new arrangement to the others. I trust that every animal here appreciates the sacrifice that Comrade Napoleon has made in taking this extra labor upon himself. Do not imagine that leadership is a pleasure. No one believes more firmly than Comrade Napoleon that all animals are equal. He would be only too happy to let you make your decisions for yourselves. But sometimes you might make the wrong decisions, and then where should we be? Suppose you had decided to follow Snowball, who was, as we know, no better than a criminal. So every Sunday morning the animals assembled in a big barn to receive their orders for the week. The skull of Old Major had been disinterred from the orchard. After the hoisting of the flag, the animals were required to file past the skull in a reverent manner before entering the barn. On the third Sunday after Snowball's expulsion, the animals were somewhat surprised to hear Napoleon announce that the windmill was to be built after all. That evening, Squealer explained privately to the other animals that Napoleon had never in reality been opposed to the windmill. On the contrary, it was he who had advocated it in the beginning, and the plan which Snowball had drawn on the floor of the incubator shed had actually been stolen from among Napoleon's papers. The windmill was, in fact, Napoleon's own creation.